taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. I know Jessica is the chair of the Recycling Working Group, and then Wes Rubio from Washoe County Health District is also the co-chair. So I want to kick it back to you, Jessica. This is your group. Feel free to run with it as you will. I'm a fly here on the wall, but feel free to reach out if you guys need anything.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, all. Thank you again for your time and joining us today. I have a brief slide deck that I've developed to help guide this discussion, I hope, and kind of keep us on track for our hour-long meeting today. So I'm going to go ahead and share that screen. Hopefully this will come up. Can you guys see a presentation here?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Super. Let's go ahead and start the show. So yes, again, good morning, everyone. This is our first meeting of the Recycling Working Group for the Partners for Sustainable Nevada. Apologies for starting it today, November 1st, instead of last month, which is when we were really hoping to get going, but schedules and other urgent work and things like that sort of conspired against us. Short agenda here. I'd like to go through some introductions. Then we can talk about the current state of affairs that we see in terms of recycling in Nevada. Talk about some goals, including definition of some boundaries and some guardrails. Define some objectives to present, because we do have kind of a short deadline coming up in March of next year. Any barriers that we see as far as either internally to this group or externally to our goals. And then what resources we may have to achieve these goals that we're looking for. And then finally, some next steps, set up any kind of homework that we may have, and then develop a meeting cadence. I know I'm kind of talking a lot, but obviously let's kind of be, I guess, collegial, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time. So I guess next slide would be introductions. So I think we should kind of go around the horn, maybe alphabetically. And let me see if I can minimize this so that I can see everyone. There we go. I'll go first. I am Jessica Preston. I am the environmental manager for Republic Services in Southern Nevada. I'm currently working from home in lovely Boulder City, Nevada. I've been with Republic about 3.5 years, but I have around 20 years in the waste business, whether as a consultant doing solid and hazardous waste work, or in the environmental compliance and sustainability end of things with waste management, and then now with Republic Services. I'm super motivated about this effort because I firmly believe that we need to move the needle in Nevada in terms of our sustainability as a state. And I really, really think that recycling can help do that. I don't think recycling is the way to achieve the most perfect future imaginable, but it is one important piece of that sustainable future. So I guess from there, Wes, would you like to introduce yourself? Wes, can you hear us? Okay, we'll come back to Wes. I'm just going to go by what I have on the screen. Hi, Leo. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Hey, Jessica. How are you? Leo Drostoff, environmental consultant, and worked with many of the people on this call. Look forward to participating where I can.
Great. Thank you so much. How about Bridget McHale?
Good morning. I'm Bridget McHale with NV Energy. I've been with NV Energy about 3.5 years in the environmental compliance and sustainability departments. And previously I was in consulting in Illinois and have some with a company that did a lot of work with landfills, recycling, and green waste and things like that. So.
Wonderful, welcome. Oh, Wes, you're back. Would you mind introducing yourself as the co-chair?
Yes, sorry, I got an urgent phone call, so I had to deal with that. My name is Wes Rubio with the Washoe County Health District. I currently oversee our waste management program, which entails all of our solid waste management, our recycling permitting, and those items. among a few other programs too. And then mostly just trying to partner with Jessica to figure out some options for NDP moving forward. Ideally, some long-term solutions that work well for Nevada and try to enable us to move forward in a good light.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wes. How about Miss Aster Gurma?
Good morning to all. My name is Aster Gurma and the founder of Nevada Green Institute. I have been in the business for many years, many decades, and sustainable development and planning and economic development, now sustainability, and more we focus on community education and sustainability and design project relevant to the region. We believe that public awareness and community engagement play critical role in the success or failure of our effort. I'm hoping we will tie any project we do with public education outreach project as well. So I'm very interested in recycling and waste reduction because it is part of sustainability effort, best practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. How about Todd Welty? Would you mind introducing yourself?
Todd Welty here. Sorry, my camera's not working this morning for some reason. I'm the Environmental Program Manager for the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, and I'm interested in recycling as part of our Airport Authority's ongoing sustainability programs and initiatives, as well as trying to enhance and improve the recycling and waste reduction programs in northern Nevada, throughout the state of Nevada. So that's where my interest lies in these topics.
Super, thank you, sir. Susan Fisher, would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. Susan Fisher with McDonald Carano. It's a law firm here in Nevada. And my interest has a number of different turns to it. I had the pleasure of working on the first curbside recycling bill when I was an intern at the legislature, working for the legislator who introduced that bill in 1989. The bill didn't get through that session, but it did get through in 1991. And so I was very pleased to see that. But I also represent the Nevada State Apartment Association, and we have a lot of challenges with recycling in apartment complexes. And so want to track these things for that, as well as just interested in sustainability for Nevada. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Clinton, would you mind introducing yourself, please? Clinton, you might be on mute.
Very good. Thanks for catching that. Clint Combs with Combs Brothers and Las Vegas Livestock here in Southern Nevada. We operate our business with the hotels and casinos and food repairs here in Vegas. My dad had the pig farm here for over 50 years, RC Farms. And then my brother and I started the Combs Brothers about 14 years ago. So, and then part of that is, of course, taking the food scraps from the casinos and feeding it to our livestock up at Las Vegas Livestock. I guess that's it. Look forward to seeing what we're discussing today.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Let's see. And if I start missing folks or calling you twice, my apologies. The squares keep moving around on the screen. How about Phoebe Judge?
I'm Phoebe Judge with Waste Management. My background is in clean energy and energy efficiency. I worked for the Clean Energy Project in Southern Nevada around 2012, and then I moved over to Colorado and did energy efficiency program work. And now I'm back in Reno as Waste Management's recycling coordinator and ombudsman.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good to have you. And let's see, Jeremy Walters.
Good morning, everyone. Jeremy Walters, Community Relations Manager for Public Services, Jessica's colleague, who put that together. I work here in the Southern Nevada market, heavily on recycling and sustainability, so natural fit for me to be on the group, pretty well versed in how recycling operations go here in Southern Nevada. And hopefully we can tie some of the things that are going on in this group to the group that I'm chairing with the education outreach, because there are definitely some shortfalls with recycling education and sustainability education as a whole, so I'm going to be proudly.
100%. Thanks for joining, Jeremy. And thank you, Kayla, for pointing out the participants list. I'm new to using life size. So again, thank you. Let's see. Would Patty Moen like to introduce herself?
I'm Patty Moen. I'm the recycling coordinator with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I've been in the job for about 6 years. But since someone brought up her involvement with the law group, I helped write the first recycling legislation that didn't pass and was gutted and reformulated, but back when I was in college. So I've been in the business for quite a while. Took a big break in the middle and it's still here.
Isn't that wonderful? Love these small world moments. Thanks for being here, Patty. Nima Pauline.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Nima Pauline and I'm a founder of several companies. We focus on sustainable fashion, upcycling, and textile recapture. So in some, just basically landfill diversion and closing the loop. My motivation for participation is I'm interested in supporting Nevada in any way I can. I'm part of the community now, and I think it's a team effort, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Carly Norton.
I'm Carly, and I am working for Waste Management. I'm the recycling education representative, and I'm here because I'm excited to build relationships with people and the organizations that think recycling is important and to try to find ways to improve recycling in Nevada. So thank you for having me.
Great, thanks for being here. Kendra Kostaleki, if I pronounced your last name right.
Did a great job. Good morning, I'm Kendra, and I work with Phoebe and Carly at Waste Management. Oh no, I think I froze up.
Oh no, you're
good. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. So while Phoebe and Carly are very good at the outreach, the recycling piece of it, I am the contract manager. So I make sure that we're coloring inside the lines or look for places where maybe we need to erase and redraw some of those lines. And it's good to see everybody.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for being here. Mark Kopang, did I get your name right?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Mark Kopang with Raley's and the Director of Sustainability, and always interested in knowing what Nevada is doing and how we can participate. We've got some great programs in place already to address recycling, but I think understanding, how we can continue to evolve is great. I think the benefit of being based in California is, in some respects, we're way ahead of you guys. But I think, always I'm looking for a fresh perspective here, and hopefully a way to partner with creating solutions.
Super, thank you. And Mr. Mark Cameron.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Cameron. I'm the executive director with Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful. For those of you that don't know, we're a nonprofit here locally that we work specifically to create a more sustainable and beautiful region through waste reduction, education, and active community involvement. One of those things that we do a lot of community outreach and education around recycling, for one thing. We partnered with the Washoe County Health District for many years and created a recycling guide that's available on our website, ktnb.org. And we keep that thing up to date. You'd be surprised at some of the things that we get calls about. Can it be recycled? But we have a great time educating the community about recycling. Ultimately, I think we'd like to try to move ourselves to a more zero waste but recycling needs to remain a part of that effort. So glad to be here.
Super. Thank you for being here. I feel like I missed someone in my confusion around the participant list button. Did I miss someone? Nope. Okay. Sounds like we got everybody. Again, thanks everyone for being here this morning and for sharing who you are and why you're here today. One of the things that I thought we should maybe go over before we delve into goals and hurdles and barriers and things like that is sort of what is the current state of affairs that is facing recycling here in Nevada. I had a couple of bullet points that come to my mind: the geography, simply how vast our beautiful state is, the distances between locations, the nature of the communities that we have in this beautiful and very diverse state, as well as the economics of that. So those are just some sort of like nuggets to discuss, but I'm very interested in your thoughts on what the current state of affairs are. So I'm going to be quiet and take some notes if somebody would like to dive in.
I'll go ahead and jump in there, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I know, is a challenge for us down here in Southern Nevada is, again, recycling education. We have a very transient population coming through town, and keeping up on, informing people of what they can and cannot recycle is a big challenge, and so that leads to contamination. I think that there's opportunities to get more what I'll call agency and municipal support on that front. I think that there's a lot of different entities that could benefit from assisting in pushing out recycling education, not just in the local market, but as a state. And then, that'll potentially tie into some of the things that you're alluding to, which is that, that disparity between what I'm going to call South and North, right? There's the big rural populations in between, Reno, Carson City, and then Las Vegas, where maybe recycling programs don't exist. And so as we look at potentially helping to develop, maybe hub and spoke models, which I know is a big thing that you and I have talked about, you in particular, how we can make sure that informing people the right way to do these things is woven into these programs to create long-term success. I know recycling contamination is a buzzword, not just here in Southern Nevada, but across the nation. And so we need to figure out how we can best leverage existing resources to try and pump that out to different stakeholders, whether that's members of the public, businesses, again, government. There's all sorts of folks that can benefit from recycling and recycling the right way. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. Great points. Wonderful. Anyone else like to jump in and provide their perspective?
So something I've noticed is that exactly what you were speaking about earlier, Jeremy, is the education. Also, there's just not a lot of data, it seems, about what's being recycled and how it is. And there's this huge gap of what's not getting recycled. So like there's landfill and there's like, do we burn the waste? There's all these different ways of dealing with the waste, and they just don't seem to be, there's just not a lot of data. And then why isn't there educational promotional advertisements on TV about, how to recycle, what you can recycle, community outreaches, like in school. There's things like, I'm new here and it's like, what can I recycle, what I can't? There's no instruction. And I think that's a huge problem, not only in this state, but across the country. There's no just a standard, a benchmark, and how to recycle, what we recycle, and how does that get done. And so I think the educational piece is really key, because if people don't know what to do, they don't know what to do. And if they don't know, they don't know. So it's really basic stuff about inputs, education, whether it's working with radio stations, the casinos, creating, or nonprofit organizations, creating messaging for the public, letting them know where they can and what they can do and how they can do it. And that's pretty much my complaint.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that, Nima, and I don't want to shut you down, but the education subgroup or work group is really the place for a lot of those comments.
Okay.
They're the ones who are really focused on that. And Jeremy Walters is the chair of that group. So if you wanted to join that group and share your passion around that, I'm sure that would be an excellent spot for that. And for anybody else here, education is absolutely vital, but we have to kind of limit ourselves in thinking about recycling in a slightly different way for this work group.
Actually, I'm part of that group, so I appreciate you explaining that. Yeah, no, it's just there's these moving parts that aren't really talked about, so I apologize for that.
Hey, no apologies needed. No. Let's
Okay.
see, there were some other hands up, but they seem to have come down now.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say I'm sorry for leading the flock astray for a moment there, because, you know, a lot of what I talk about will then carry over. That's really why I'm here is one part of it is to, you know, offer, and Jessica has a wealth of knowledge as well, but offer some insight as to, you know, what exists in Southern Nevada in terms of recycling capability, infrastructure, all those things. And then you'll hear me mention recycling education. And I don't want to take up a ton of time on this group because Jessica's right. That's where we're going to take some of these components. My group is targeted at broad education, right? Recycling will be a piece of that, but trying to figure out, you know, how this group can really move the needle with recycling. And that'll be more focused on what I was saying Jessica's talked about a lot on other calls prior to this. I'm sure she'll jump into it, but, you know, how do we get recycling to areas that maybe don't have it, right? And so that's why I just say, you know, we got to make sure that we're working cohesively to bring those things in there. We'll tackle the education piece in my working group, but this is more focused on, I don't know, maybe I'll call it the operations of it.
Yeah, infrastructure, economics, rules, and we'll get into that in the goals for a second here. Now, Wes, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually just going to kind of tag on to what Jeremy was discussing, and the differences between the focus and what we're aiming at. And I know Jessica and I have talked, and it's actually really interesting that you know, both of us are on opposite sides, literally of the highly populated areas in the state. And as we've discussed, and I think everybody on the call is probably completely aware of, Las Vegas and Reno and Carson area are completely different animals in not just how we operate, but just the actual environment in which we operate up here, and there are challenges to each one. And so one of the things with the group that I think we have to focus on is not only how do we make this work for places in Southern Nevada, but how do we make this work for places in Northern Nevada? And then how do we encompass that model to start to work within our more rural entities and not create too much havoc as we go about it, which is why it's nice to see that there's a lot of the business professionals that are also in this group, so that they can bring in their information on what we do. Coming from the regulatory standpoint, I can write whatever rule we want. That's not a problem. The actual problem would come down to, what do we do with it? How do we implement it? Does it hurt business? Does it help business? Does it actually affect recycling, or does it do the opposite because we made it too constricting or too difficult? And so I think those are the challenges that all encompass and kind of target what Jeremy was just mentioning. And how do we look at this from a global, or at least a larger 500,000 foot level project for the state?
That's right. And I'm glad you brought up the point about, you didn't say this exactly, but unintended consequences. And that's something we definitely need to discuss as we're getting into our goals section. Yes, Patty, you raised your hand.
I get a lot of calls, or I don't know about a lot, but I get a number of calls from businesses that are looking to recycle, actually process materials in the state. So that is one thing like the market development piece, trying to keep materials in state instead of sending them out could help, with our transportation issues and that kind of thing. So that's one thing, trying to work with the industry as well as, people that collect materials. I think that's really important. And another, we do have some data on what is being recycled in the state, or diverted for recycling, I should say. But we don't really have a lot of data on like what is coming in and what could be, diverted. So I think that kind of piece is missing. So, just trying to connect all the dots. And I've also been working on hub and spoke and talking with rural folks. So I think that is an important piece that I want to work on.
Fantastic. And I think you hit the nail on the head with a couple of your points there around businesses wanting to come here and establish, say, a facility where they can recycle X material, whether that's HDPE or PET or, something, right? And bring jobs here. That will improve the economics and diversify the state economy. And that will then help allow for other programs to come into place down the line. And again, the hub and spoke, I think, is huge, and that's definitely mentioned in one of these later slides, and is something I'm pretty passionate about as well. So just in the interest of time, does anybody else have anything they want to share about their thoughts on the current state of affairs? And then we can move into the next couple slides. Okay, then. So the next slide I have up here is kind of our goals. And one thing that Wes and I talked about in our meeting, and after watching some of the other calls that I couldn't participate in because I couldn't get my computer to work, we really felt like we need to be clear about defining some objectives and defining some boundaries and guardrails, right? Because we could easily get a little bit off track and spin our wheels, and we don't really have a whole lot of time or energy to do that. So we had some suggestions kind of based on the survey that came out. One of those would be recommending modifications to the state rules and the state solid waste management plan. These recommendations would be submitted to the policy committee, not necessarily directly to NDEP. Of course, NDEP would be in the loop on this. Another goal that we discussed was improving tracking and maybe providing some better guidance about how to use the retrack application, and maybe some more standard definitions or standard conversion factors for when you're filling out the retrack database. So that might go, Nima, to your point on what do we really recycle, where's the data, that could help with that. And then what Patty mentioned as well is how can we help support the hub and spoke effort? And I realize that that is still very much in the infancy of the program, but what are ways that we as the recycling group can brainstorm and come up with ways to reach the rurals or get material from, for example, Winnemucca or Jackpot to Reno or Las Vegas, right? So kind of defining those objectives. I'm going to go into the second bullet around defining the boundaries or guardrails. And I would really just implore everyone in this group to stay really focused. And I liked what someone said, I think it was Wes and Jeremy as well, talking about this group needs to sort of stay separate from the education or the policy pieces, or even the sustainability group that Laura Rosales is the chair of, but focus on regulation, operations, and industry much more so than education, for example. But we have sort of a unique set of skills here that we can use. The other thing I think we need to define or try to focus on is the types of materials we're going to be discussing. I think there's a huge opportunity for a variety of different types of recycling, but we may need to limit it, and I'm interested in opinions on this, on all of these things, but limit this to traditional recycling types. Aluminum and metals, plastics, OCC, instead of getting creative with the different types of materials that we can recycle. That may be phase 2. Once we get a network in place to move material around the state, that could be a phase 2 or something like that. And again, limiting the overlap with other working groups. So thoughts on the objectives, the boundaries or guardrails approach, what do you guys think?
I guess I'd just proclaim my support. I think that staying focused on, I'm going to call it the baseline materials, right? The things that are already supposed to be readily accepted, and how we boost those efforts. Because I think that there's a lot of folks out there that talk about recovery of some niche materials that I think that they're worth talking about. Maybe down the road, like you said. So just simply wanting to say that I support the statement that we need to focus on what exists now and how we can improve that.
Great, thank you. Others?
Yeah, I have a question. So you say plastics, would that include synthetic fibers? Because it's plastic. You can melt them the same way. You process them the same way. Would that include that or no?
Boy, Nima,
Probably not, huh?
unfortunately, I wish we could, but in the state of Nevada, to my knowledge, and someone please correct me, I don't think there's really a collection network for that, nor a back-end market for that that's readily available. And to me, that's a piece that's super important, is that back-end market. We need to be able to send this material, whatever it is, to a entity that, and we can talk about whether that's preferably in Nevada, preferably in the United States, North America, worldwide, but we need to have a place to send it first before we can start talking about collecting it. And I totally see what you're saying. And
So that sounds like toll processors, toll plastic processors, and you guys have them here.
I'm not aware of that.
So I'll jump in here. This is synthetic fibers is something I get asked about frequently at the MERC. So they're a completely different category of what I'll say is recyclable material. It doesn't matter if it's the same polymer as a PET water bottle, it has to be handled separately. And we don't have the infrastructure to handle synthetic fibers, in addition to the fact that we don't even know what volumes exist. So they have to be moved separately. I get people, conventions are a big thing. People come in for the conventions and, you know, they say, oh, I've got this recyclable carpet, you know, it's a PET blend, you know, carpet, and it's 100% recyclable. And, you know, there's a level of truth to that. But when you start peeling the layers of the onion, it's not as easy as it sounds. And, you know, that's where the recycling industry as a whole has gotten so convoluted because, and you're going to hear things in the near future about extended producer responsibility because of things just like this. You've got people that can stamp recyclable symbols on a material and it's not really recyclable because the circularity does not exist. And so that's where I think we need to focus on the infrastructure that exists. You know, you hear statistics thrown around, oh, only 5% of plastic gets recycled. Well, that's a true statement if you look at it in a simplistic sense, but when you start, again, peeling the layers, well, maybe only 5% of plastics produced are produced with the intention of recycling on the back end. So it's still a worthy conversation, I think, and I'm not the chair of this group, so I'm not going to dictate where we go with it, but I think that that's something that maybe down the line, once we perfect what we have, we could start looking at those things, and maybe we can start figuring out how to do some data tracking on, you know, the volume of synthetic fibers. It requires a completely separate collection. We can't run synthetic fibers through our MERC. We have a 110,000 square foot facility here in Southern Nevada to handle bottles, cans, paper, cardboard. Synthetic fibers, if they're blended in there, you have to have some sort of specialized machinery that can pull it out. So if you take that away from it, then you're talking about a source separation, which is its own hell, and then, you know, potentially having to bail that material, however that looks.
That's right. And that is a worthy conversation. Maybe that's something we could have a sidebar chat about, so we can keep this conversation moving. But I would definitely, you know, encourage this sort of networking where, you know, maybe Nima, Jeremy, and I sit down and have a quick chat, or other folks. Dr. Rosales mentioned she wants to learn how to make her campus recycling program work better by learning from other people's experiences. That might be something that is another outcome of this group. It isn't something we're discussing today per se. Wes, did you have your hand up?
You actually basically said exactly what I was going to say, which would be a fantastic sidebar. Jeremy was 100% correct. I believe all the waste management folks will be on here will be saying the same thing. I think right now the biggest focus is how do we address the basic recycling process that we have and actually make them truly functional and worthwhile. And I know Jessica's had her own instances and issues with even just
Uh-oh, Wes, I think you froze.
what Jeremy said would be the primary focus so that we could hit that. And then again, we can have a sidebar about some of the other specialties.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I guess one thing I'd like to say then is, what do folks think about as far as goals or objectives for this group being the three that are bulleted there, recommending some modifications to the state rules and state solid waste plan. Oh, and I'm sorry, somebody else had their hand up. Was that Nima? Yes, Nima, or I'm sorry.
No,
Astrid,
it wasn't
would
me.
you please go ahead? I apologize before I launch into my next spiel.
Is it me?
Yes, ma'am. Apologize.
Okay.
I misspoke.
No problem. First, I thank you very much for defining, presenting the goal and the objective that we need to have to focus the energy, what needs to be done. I appreciate that. And the second is we need to define the type of materials we are focusing on recycling in our state. And clearly writing this is materials we are going to go. So we need to go to the reading and then present it and discuss what can be done. The other thing is I would like to add is there is a new material also need to focus on the renewable energy technologies recycle. Not yet. It starts different places, the batteries and the PV. I'm very interested in solar PV, and this is very important to start it from now on to lay the groundwork for the transition to the circular economy. It is complex. Yes, we know we need to go to the rule and the rule and regulations and laws and other stuff. Without that, we can't accomplish. But do you have any plan to incorporate this material, the solar, the renewable energy materials into the recycling discussion at this moment?
Not at this point. I think we should, my personal opinion, and I think Wes and I are on the same page about this, is that we need to kind of focus on the traditional baseline materials and not get into some of the more niche or more futuristic materials. But we have so many low-hanging fruit in terms of aluminum cans, plastic bottles, OCC, that we could easily dilute our efforts if we're trying to reach for the moon, so to speak. So I think we need to stay focused. Wes, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, we also need to pay attention to where the regulatory authorities are too. So
100%. Yep.
The recycling of like when you get into solar and things like that, we're crossing a bunch of boundaries that we don't want to play in. Quite honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I add at the solar? We don't start immediately recycling. No. It is just we develop a strategy, the transition to the recycling, like other states did. For example, in Seattle, Washington, they have done, in New York and other states. That's but I understood what you said. Thank you.
And you bring up a great point, Astor, about other states. And I guess I would say we can look to them as models or for ideas, but I think that we need to be very realistic about what Nevada has in terms of infrastructure and funding and what our barriers are. Phoebe, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, this is a little bit of a deviation from what you guys are talking about at the moment, but from a collection standpoint, I'm sure you guys are dealing with the same thing at Republic Services. Our goal is to get contamination rates down. And right now, I'm not sure how much people are aware, but recycling is in a really good position. Plastic prices for recycled plastics are, I think, more competitive than they have ever been. So I just want to point out to everyone in this group that there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of good momentum happening within the economics of recycling. But our goal for that is, of course, to first improve the end result and get contamination down, which is about 23% right now in Northern Nevada for recycled materials.
Wow, that's actually a wonderful contamination rate. Congratulations, that's good. Nice job. I mean, realistically, and coming from the Southeast, yeah, that's a pretty darn good rate. So, no, and good point about the reduction of contamination. That could potentially be something that goes into these goals. But to me, the reduction of contamination, and I haven't sat in on the education piece, but that would be a goal for the education, is to get people to recycle often, recycle right, and not be throwing in bowling balls into their curbside bin, for example. So thoughts around that as far as one of the goals?
I think you're right as well, that it really is focused a lot on education, and that's a lot of what we're currently doing. And we're always happy to explain more about what our efforts are. But again, more of the education side on that. And Susan Fisher, you mentioned that you were interested, or you were working on something with apartment buildings. That is something that I'm also interested in, so would love to chat with you more on that, and if that fits in with this working group.
I think it does, and under that hub and spoke effort, because that's driving material to the hubs. And I think too, I was trying to keep the slide simple, but in my notes I have in here for the hub and spoke multifamily dwellings, which would include apartment complexes and condominiums and things like that, as well as the rural areas. I really don't want to forget about the rurals. I think that's a super important piece of this. And I think we will be better served by trying to get aluminum, for example, which has a pretty high value and is fairly easy to recycle, from the rurals into a recycling plant. I think that's a really good way for our group to move forward. Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And Phoebe, I would love to chat with you. That's one of the goals that we've had up here in Northern Nevada. And as Susan, I'm sure you can attest, recycling at multifamily is a very difficult process, but I think everybody on the call would agree that our recycling goals for the state of Nevada won't be hit and or fully realized until we actually look at recycling outside of just the residential side. And I believe that's where the hub and spoke models come into play. I believe that's where we can start to make those changes with solid waste management plan and incorporating some of these aspects into the regulations or policies as we move forward, that will help try and create more balance to being able to bring the recycling community together. Instead of just solely focusing on individual residences and then voluntary recycling at that point. And so I think that there's an opportunity here that we have that where we can all see some really good progression, hopefully.
Yes, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I definitely would be supportive of trying to boost multifamily recycling. I think that maybe this is where it is part of the conversation for this group is, if we start tracking down how to implement it, we need to, I'm going to speak, on behalf of Republic and say we need some protection in there because Wes is right. We're never going to meet the state's recycling goal when we're not recycling in multifamily, but what he alluded to with challenges is what Phoebe was talking about in terms of contamination. Contamination is significant in multifamily settings because it's very transient. I mean, people move in, they move out. My mom lives in a condo complex down the street, and every time I go over there, there's a mattress in the dumpster, right? I mean, people throw away a lot of stuff. So how do we implement programs that will be successful that curb contamination before it's even a problem? But in short, yeah, I'd love to see some discussion on multifamily recycling.
Great. I think one of the later slides I have in there a question around maybe some subgroups or people that want to do their homework together, for example. And I think the multifamily question could very well fit that model if that people would be willing to do that. Does anyone see, we're just in the interest of time, does anybody see any other discussion around the three kind of bullet points there? The recommended modifications to the rules and state solid waste management plan, improvement on tracking, and then supporting the hub and spoke effort, which does encompass the multifamily and rurals. Okay. Great. And I'm not trying to rush people. If you have questions or comments or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me after the call. Cell phone is the best way to get me, and I can provide that contact information. I did want to kind of quickly talk through some barriers to what we're planning. I love this picture. I took this on South Mitchell Ridge in the Ruby Mountains. That's overlooking Ruby Marsh. And when you're up there, you feel like there's zero barriers to anything. Like you can go forever, you can see forever. So to me, it makes sense for this barrier slide. For us as a work group, I feel like one of the biggest barriers we're going to have are time and other commitments, because we all have other jobs, we all have families or lives outside of work and things like that. But what other internal barriers are out there that maybe we as a group can help each other overcome? Okay, so somebody just needs to invent a 36-hour day and we'll be good, right? Okay, good. I'll work on that. External barriers to the goals that we kind of are talking about, to me, include things like funding, education. We have work groups on both of those, but the geography of Nevada is a reality. Distances and differences in culture. It's a very different culture. I just drove through Silver Peak not that long ago, and I was thinking, how am I going to convince the folks here in Silver Peak, Nevada, how to recycle, right? How am I going to get buy-in from them? That might be a little tough. So distances and culture are kind of a big thing. What about other external barriers? Okay. And then finally, resources. The resources that we have to bring to bear to try to address these questions and these goals, I have in here, obviously, Nevada DEP and other states. I think, Aster, you brought that up about what's happening in Washington State. I think there are good models. New Mexico, I think, Patty, you guys were using them as maybe a guide for some of the hub and spoke work. Industry and municipalities, I think Waste Management or Public need to talk. I think it'd be great to include Washoe County and Clark County SNHD in the loop on that. Bring in industry like Raley's and other folks, Combs Industries, and really try to talk through what kind of resources and ideas we have, what knowledge we have. And then finally, the nonprofits as well. You guys have a different perspective and different point of view on what's out there in terms of resources. And then there's probably something else out there, but I want to encourage us to talk independently outside of these formal meetings, but also share the information that you guys have, whether that's through an email sent to me, sent to Kayla to be the clearinghouse of information. I think we need to kind of make sure we're sharing information. If you find a great website, send it out to the group, please.
And
any other
Laura
thoughts on barriers and resources? I'm sorry.
Laura made a comment that there might be possible information barriers as part of the external barriers.
Brilliant. Yes, that's right. So information barriers, can you elaborate? Because I think I'm thinking one thing, and let me make sure I'm understanding. I know you're in the text chat because your audio and visual are challenging. But maybe like we just don't know what someone else has done elsewhere, or maybe there's a research paper that we're not aware of. Ah, excellent. Good. So tracking on that with Dr. Rosales. Okay, any other thoughts on this one? Yes, Miss Patty.
Well, like national groups like the Recycling Partnership, the American Plastics Recyclers, I think is what it's called. So there's a few national things and that have, you know, groups that have initiatives. So I can definitely help with finding some of those. But they also may have some funding and some educational materials and things like that we could use for sure.
That's a great point. And yeah, and I was thinking about EREF, but I don't even remember what that stands for, but they do a lot of innovation around waste and recycling. They write a lot of gray papers, I believe.
Oh, and also ISRI, the Institute of Scrap Recycling, they have a lot of data on, you know, like economic data that could be useful as well.
Yeah, that's great. Making some notes here. And yes, Wes, please go ahead.
The one thing I was going to bring up too is I'm not sure what Southern Nevada has or Las Vegas or whatever's down there, but we have EDAWN up here, which is the economic development of, I don't remember what the last acronyms were. So if somebody does, that'd be awesome. But either way, that they're like our local economic development group. So they try and help, bring new businesses in, and that would be, a way to bring in some of those other types of recyclers, or like, for example, in Northern Nevada, a composter would be pretty cool if we could get someone up here to start helping us out with some of those things. So along those lines, I think those are some of the other agencies or groups that could probably provide some assistance.
And Susan mentioned the Economic Development Authority of Western Nevada, EDAWN. I was writing it EDON, so that's good to know. Sounds like there's an opportunity for a pig farm up north, Clinton.
Yeah, we've investigated that. Typically has to be around a big touristy location such as Reno, but there's other barriers there with space on the docks and land that you could put a pig farm or a livestock facility. So
sure, those are key details to think about as we're talking through our ideas. A lot of stuff sounds like a brilliant idea, but when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, is there room on the docks? Is there a parcel of land that's adequate in size and is zoned properly and doesn't have the neighbors that would have issues with that type of facility? So these are things I think we need to kind of keep in mind as we're brainstorming. So one of the things that I thought we should talk about too are next steps. So obviously homework, that's something I think we're all going to have to take on the burden of with this active working group. I mentioned the idea of subgroups and who wants to work with who on what. We don't have to decide this right now. Kayla, I was actually thinking that maybe we could do kind of a quick poll to our group after this call, so that way folks could think about it with these different goals in mind, what they might like to work on, what time they can commit to it. But then we also need to decide, I think today would be a good time to decide this, what is the meeting cadence? Not just for the subgroups, that doesn't have to be decided today, but for this group in particular. I think a monthly call is probably a little too spaced out, but wasn't sure what people's time and commitment level and availability is.
This is Susan Fisher. I think if we do have some subgroups working on some, for instance, those who want to talk about multifamily housing, I'm happy to work with them on that. And then if we all sort of do our own thing in the subgroups and then come back once a month for the whole group to report back, that's probably, I think that would be sufficient. But
that makes good sense. That way we're not drowning in meetings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and something you mentioned, Jessica, I would definitely be interested in talking to, Phoebe and whoever else at Waste and, Wes's crew and maybe the Southern Nevada Health District to make sure that maybe we can create some uniformity, right, in terms of, from the hauler, processor, regulator standpoint, what we accept and make sure we're all on the same page. So if there's any benefit to that, I'd be on board for that.
Super, thank you. So it sounds like there's some willingness to kind of participate in some hub groups and then roll back into a monthly meeting. Does anybody have a disagreement on that?
Okay. I was going to say essentially the same exact thing that Susan said, so I'm in agreement.
Thank you, Phoebe, for confirming that. I appreciate it. All right. Well, if there's no dissension, then let's suggest a meeting in very early December. We'll send that out. If anybody has a hard conflict, please advise. You can send me an email or Kayla. I don't know if we need to do a poll for the next meeting as well. We can certainly do that. But I think maybe if we set the meeting for, oh, and I haven't changed my wall calendar over. Let me see if I can come up with another calendar. But if we can set the meeting for maybe the first Monday in December, if that would work for folks. Okay. And then there were 2 comments in the chat that I missed. I apologize. A listserv from Dr. Rosales where people posted their excess rebar products, for example, that others could pick up. Is there something like this in Nevada? Kind of a sharing of materials for reuse. That's a good question. I know there's some apps like Let Go and things like that. Maybe that's part of a phase 2 for a recycling group to study on, is how do you connect people with other people who could reuse construction material, for example. And then Nima, what is an RMDZ?
So they're called Recycle Market Development Zones, and every state has them. And you guys have them here. It's actually, you have one here, and it's very large. I actually work with the California one, and they're great for in terms of funding, incentives. It's great for businesses wanting to come into the state. They will support them. That's one of the reasons why we are here. I work exclusively with the RMD's Recycle Market Development Zones because of that. They tend to be tied into the governor's office, and yeah, it's been great for us. So I highly recommend that organization. It's state, but it's a great group.
Okay, we'll certainly investigate that. Thank you. Okay. Well, so addressing the comments in the chat and then holding a meeting, as I didn't hear any dissension, on the first Monday of December, and then setting up some working groups via a poll, sub-working groups via a poll around that. Did I kind of capture that correctly? I'm seeing some head nods.
Not going to stop the whole group. I'll be down at the corporate office the first half of the week in December 6th, 7th, 8th. But carry on, Valley.
All right. We'll do our best, Jeremy. Okay, well, barring no dissent, then I guess we'll conclude the meeting. I truly appreciate you all being here today, your energy, your interest, and all the great comments and questions. Obviously, please communicate with each other, communicate with me. If you don't have my email address or contact information, please reach out to Kayla, and she can certainly help network all of us together. Super. Well, have a great day, you guys. You get 2 minutes of your day back.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.